KBCX Gregory, and WVIW Bridgeport.
History was made on today's date. Stay tuned for an American Minute with Bill Federer.
Damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead, were the words of Admiral David Farragut, who captured Mobile, Alabama, and on this day, April 29, 1862, captured New Orleans. Under tremendous fire, he breached the heavy chain cable that stretched across the Mississippi and led his ships up the channel filled with mines called torpedoes. The loss of New Orleans was a major disaster for the South, as it was the Confederacy's largest city. During his last illness, David Farragut, the Navy's first four-star admiral, asked for a clergyman to pray to the Lord for him, saying, "He must be my pilot now."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Friends, thank you for joining us today on Crosstalk. Very important topic and issues today on the broadcast. Ladies and gentlemen, the information is shocking. I mean, for years, the Southern Poverty Law Center raised tons of money, claiming that they were exposing organizations with ties to hate groups. I mean, ties to white supremacy, including the Ku Klux Klan. Well, last Tuesday, a federal indictment was handed down by the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, who said the SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose. FBI Director Kash Patel said the SPLC used the money they raised from their donor network to actually pay the leadership of these very groups. With us today is one of the organizations that the SPLC listed as a so-called hate group. Matt Staver today from Liberty Counsel. He's a founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Matt is a constitutional attorney with 3 landmark cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. He is an author. He is a host of the broadcast Faith and Freedom and Freedom's Call on Radio, the TV broadcast Freedom Alive. Matt, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jim. Good to be with you. There's a lot to cover here in this particular situation.
Indeed. And just before we get to the Southern Poverty Law Center, Matt, a couple of Supreme Court decisions today. Breaking news came out from the court. First of all, a 9-0 decision today, a victory for First Choice Women's Resource Center. What was this about?
Yeah, this is about the state of New York trying to intimidate crisis pregnancy centers for these pregnancy help groups. And so First Choice Women's Resource Centers filed suit against New Jersey, I should say, not New York, but New Jersey is the same way. New York has done something very similar. And so they're subpoenaing different kinds of donor records, or they're threatening to subpoena them, and they sent a subpoena to different crisis pregnancy centers there in order to intimidate them. They said that they were misleading consumers with a vague website about their pro-life stance and advertising that the abortion pill reversal protocol was possible. They demanded to have the donor records and operational records spanning the last 10 years. They said, well, we needed the donor records to find out if you're misleading consumers. Well, you know, the abortion pill protocol reversal regimen, that is progesterone, and what the abortion pill mifepristone does is it stops the production of progesterone, thus starves the baby and kills the baby. So the abortion pill reversal protocol actually adds progesterone. If someone took the mifepristone and they changed their mind in time, then it's a simple counteraction. You give them more progesterone because the pill is trying to stop the production of it, so now you give them progesterone, and therefore there's been a large percentage of success where babies have been saved. So the crisis pregnancy centers around the country, they are promoting that. There's billboards that deal with that. Well, the Democrat attorneys general in New York, and this particular one in New Jersey, They don't like that. They would rather get the abortion pill, kill the baby, and give no alternative provision for the mother that wants to reverse that horrible decision. And so the First Choice Women's Resource Center, they did a preemptive lawsuit against the state of New Jersey to stop this. And New Jersey said, well, no, you shouldn't be able to do that. We haven't enforced it yet. We're just asking for it. You have to wait until we enforce it. The Supreme Court said no. The Supreme Court said an official demand for private donor information is enough to discourage reasonable individuals from associating with the group, wrote Justice Neil Gorsuch, who authored the unanimous opinion. He says, whether the subpoena's demands and penalties were immediately enforceable or contingent on future court action, donors would reasonably fear disclosure and hesitate to associate. And therefore, he says, this subpoena chills the First Amendment associational rights, even when disclosure is only to the government and not the public. That's according to the opinion. So it's a great decision, 9-0.
Yeah, indeed. And again, that's a victory for First Choice Women's Resource Center in New Jersey. And Matt, additional breaking news today from the court, a 6-3 decision ruling that drawing congressional districts based on race is unconstitutional. And this is in regard to a map drawn in Louisiana, isn't it?
Yeah, it's regarding a map drawn in Louisiana. So this is a huge decision because Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act has been interpreted in the past by different courts, and in fact in the lower court in this case, to require the state to actually carve out special districts based on race. I know in Florida some years ago we had a crazy district. It was a little sliver that went down through the middle of the state. It was an odd-looking district, and Florida carved that out specifically so that a candidate based on race could be there. And so you had this radical Democrat African-American candidate that was in this specially designed, very odd-looking precinct or district just based on race. The Supreme Court says, as of today, the Constitution prohibits that. That violates equal protection. When you draw a district solely based on race, that's unconstitutional. You know, you can draw a district based on political power, political politics. So, you know, that means Republicans, like, for example, in Florida, Republicans are in the majority in the House, Senate, and the governor's mansion. And because Florida has grown so much, Governor DeSantis is calling a special session to redraw the districts in Florida based upon the new changing demographics, which may ultimately add 4 congressional members to Florida alone based upon these newly drawn districts that are pending and should be deployed in the future. There's some other states, however, that are in the process, a couple of weeks away, maybe 6 weeks, maybe up to 2 months away with the election. Those particular states won't be affected because their election is pending. So obviously you couldn't redraw a district with only 3 weeks or, you know, a short time. But in Florida, the primaries are not until August, and that's the case with many other states around the country.
Yeah, and the Supreme Court just ruled in favor of Texas and their redistricting.
Yeah, that's going to be a big decision as well. So the Supreme Court allowed that redistricting to move forward, and the Republicans were able to redistrict in Texas. So that is a good decision. And this one here, I think, is a great decision because it's really, you know, to think that you have to intentionally carve out a district just to have a particular race demography, whether it's African Americans, Hispanic, Asians, white, whatever it is. I mean, that's just unconstitutional. It's wrong, and that's what the Supreme Court ruled in the 6-3 decision.
You know, if that would have been allowed to stand, I mean, we have those who are trying to take sexual orientation and gender identity issues as being equivalent to race, and how long before we would see a state carve out a specially maneuvered district in order to make it an LGBT-friendly district?
Yeah, imagine that because, you know, they're trying to make it equivalent to race, and, you know, you get something like the Equality Act passed or some other thing like that, or some states, for example, that have something similar to it. And lo and behold, you'd have an LGBTQ district. So I think this is a great decision. It now says no more. You cannot draw it based solely upon race. If that's the case, it's unconstitutional.
And one more issue on this, Matt. I know you've been watching what's going on in Virginia. Yesterday, the Virginia Supreme Court refused to lift this stay on certifying the recent Virginia referenda question on redistricting. The current Attorney General calls this an activist judge who stopped the certification, but the former Attorney General, Ken Cuccinelli, said the Virginia legislature just did not play by the rules.
That's right. In fact, this is a good decision. So there's also something else that's part of this, and that is, can injunctive relief be part of this? Because we've got a case that's pending right now that is very similar to this, but it's on the abortion referendum, the abortion initiative that Democrats passed in 2 consecutive sessions, but they didn't do it properly. They didn't follow the rules. They've now tried to put it on the ballot for this coming election in November. We have a pending lawsuit to stop it, and it's based upon the same issue that is now before the Virginia Supreme Court. We also have injunctive relief, and that's what the court recently did not stop. In other words, the lower court enjoined with an injunction this on the ballot. The Virginia Supreme Court was asked to set that aside. They said no. They just heard oral arguments on Monday, so we should have a decision from them very soon. That is going to be a good decision, I think, for this redistricting in Virginia that is Democrat, dominated. But also, a decision on that can really help our case as we're now trying to strike the abortion initiative that we filed recently in the state Supreme Court using the same legal arguments that's in the case currently waiting for a decision at the Virginia Supreme Court.
Okay, so the whole matter then of the redistricting for the vote that was taken here on Election Day in Virginia, has to work its way up through the courts, or is it over and done at this point?
Well, the one that is at the Virginia Supreme Court, it'll be over and done with the decision from the Virginia Supreme Court. So they just had oral argument on Monday, so they're expediting this very quickly because the lower court just made a decision within the last couple weeks, 2 weeks. And so that's how fast it's moving. So I expect a decision from the Virginia Supreme Court very soon because Virginia's elections are coming up. They're going to have to make a decision. If they make a decision that upholds the lower court, that is really good for our case because that same legal theory that the lower court judge blocked this redistricting is very similar to our legal theory for the abortion initiative that they're putting on the ballot in November. They also have a same-sex marriage one, which also we're going to be considering attacking as well. But we're praying that we'll have a good decision. If that's the case, we can likely knock out the abortion initiative that's on the ballot this November.
Okay, and one last question on this, and we'll pick up the SPLC in our next segment, but it deals with this matter. Some are asking the question, why is it okay, and you applaud when they will claim that Texas is gerrymandering, Florida right now looking at gerrymandering, and yet when Virginia was doing that, you say, no, that's in violation of the law. Address that issue, that supposed controversy.
So how Virginia did it was in violation of the law. Virginia has a specific criteria whenever they want to put out a constitutional amendment. And the same thing happened, for example, in the abortion initiative. They bypassed all the requirements. When you amend the Constitution, typically states have specific rules and timelines in which you need to notify the public so that they know what they're voting on. Virginia Democrat leadership has chosen to violate their own rules to get this to the public and basically deceive the public and get a quick vote without them knowing exactly what they're voting upon. And so that's the difference. It's following the rules versus not following the rules. And the Virginia Democrats have been ignoring the rules that have been set in Virginia's Constitution for, decades and decades, going back to some of the early founding of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Matt Staver with us today on Crosstalk, and friends, we'll take a break here and come back, and we're going to pick up with the Southern Poverty Law Center, and certainly the information that came out just this past week, the federal indictments that were handed down against this organization who was supposedly exposing hate groups and organizations with ties to so-called hate groups. Well, it appears through the indictments that they themselves were funding the organizations that they were purporting to oppose. We're going to get right into that issue after the break. This is Crosstalk on VCY America.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and creation seminar speaker with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, during Creation Week, what kinds of fish were created?
Chris, the Bible says God created each of the animals after their kind. It says on day 5 of Creation Week that the fish were the first truly living creature that he created. This was the first use of the term living. On day 3, he had created plants, but these are never in Scripture referred to as living in the sense that they had blood or the breath of life. Plants are biologically alive, of course, but not living in the sense of having consciousness. On day 5, however, the Bible says that the oceans were literally teeming with life. Each basic type of fish was created at that point. Since that time, a lot of varieties, say of the cod or the bass or the sharks, have arisen, but no new basic kinds. God created all things after their kind, back in Genesis.
For more information, visit our website at icr.org.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Constitutional attorney Matt Staver with us today from Liberty Counsel, has 3 landmark wins before the U.S. Supreme Court. And we're going to turn our attention right now to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And we're going to address issues going on with that, as last Tuesday, the acting attorney general, Todd Blanche, made this announcement. Here's what he had to say.
Today, a few minutes ago, in the Middle District of Alabama, a grand jury returned an 11-count indictment charging the Southern Poverty Law Center with 6 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of bank fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. According to the charges in the indictment, the SPLC is a nonprofit entity that purports to fight white supremacy and racial hatred by reporting on extremist groups and conducting research to inform law enforcement groups with the goal of dismantling these groups. As the indictment describes, the SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred. The indictment describes this conduct in detail, but one troubling example is that the SPLC was paying a member of the leadership group that planned the Unite the Right protest in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017 that resulted in the death of 1 person and injured dozens more. This particular person being paid by the SPLC allegedly received approximately $270,000 over the course of 8 years. In total, according to the indictment, between 2014 and 2023, SPLC paid at least $3 million to 8 individuals at least. These individuals were affiliated with the Ku Klux Klan, United Klans of America, National Socialist Movement, Aryan Nations affiliated Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club, the Nationalist Socialist Party of America, Nazis, and the American Front. Now, as the indictment lays out, after SPLC paid members of these extremist groups, it created work product that reported on these activities that the members participated in or contributed to. And to that end, it was doing the exact opposite of what it's told its donors it was doing.
Matt, the SPLC has been indicted with 11 felony counts. We just heard from the acting attorney general, Todd Blanche, as he made this. Your organization, Liberty Counsel, has been accused of being a hate group by the SPLC. Unfold for us what's all taking place here.
Yeah, we have been targeted, so have other organizations like Family Research Council since 2011. And that's when we were added to their so-called hate list and their hate map. FRC had a very serious consequence as a result of that. and that was there was an individual by the name of Floyd Corkins that went to the SPLC's website. He was a follower of the SPLC, and he took Chick-fil-A sandwiches because the founder of Chick-fil-A had recently mentioned that marriage was the union of a man and a woman during a radio interview. And he took Chick-fil-A sandwiches, went to FRC's headquarters up in Washington, D.C., intent on committing mass murder. Unfortunately, the security guard stopped him. He was shot in the process. But Floyd Corkins testified or admitted to the law enforcement upon his arrest while he was being questioned that the reason he targeted FRC, and by the way, he had other organizations too. FRC was just one, and he was going to then commit mass murder and go on to several others in Washington, D.C. that were on the SPLC list, is because of the SPLC list. So it is very dangerous. We have actually faced a lot of, we've had to increase our security because of the SPLC, both in our travels as well as around our facilities. And we've also received debanking kinds of things where somebody wants to make a contribution and their donor-advised fund says, no, we can't do that. SPLC said no anonymous contributions to these groups. They ought to be outed. So if somebody wants to just give an anonymous contribution, even though we know them and they know us, they just don't want their name to be mentioned. Some of these different groups have, because of the SPLC, said, no, we're not going to do it. Different organizations have had their bank accounts shut down. So there's a lot of damage, both physically as well as attempted murder, and financially and other ways that the SPLC has harmed individual clients and organizations. We have a lawsuit that the SPLC has been litigating to try to bring us into some frivolous situation. We won last year after 186,000 pages and 25 depositions and thousands of pages of exhibits and hundreds of pages of legal arguments. We won the case on summary judgment. The SPLC has appealed it to the Court of Appeals, so it's up at the Court of Appeals right now. We're also at the Court of Appeals regarding a case that we represent, a conservative immigration organization. All of the people, by the way, are immigrants on the board of that conservative organization. They came through the process legally, and the SPLC put them on the hate group as well, caused a lot of damage to them. So this is a very bad organization. And as the acting attorney said, here's some of $3 million. $1 million to a neo-Nazi group called the National Alliance Affiliates, $300,000 to neo-Nazi group Aryan Nations, $270,000 to fund the Charlottesville white supremacy riot where somebody was killed. They used that money for busing, and they helped organize that. $140,000 to the National Alliance chairman. This is a white supremacy group. $73,000 directly to the Ku Klux Klan members. $19,000 to a convicted felon and leader of the white supremacist group American Front. $3 million plus dollars. So they're funding, they're getting donor money, and they're funding these groups directly. They're funding people that are high up in these groups, like a Klan leader, or they're actually funding people that become infiltrating into these organizations. And they then are part of the organization to create white supremacist hate and violence, like in Charlottesville. Then when that happens, they turn around and raise money off of it. And so they're off the Charlottesville situation, they raised millions and millions and millions of dollars, and they're the one that actually partly funded it and helped organize the actual event that they reported upon.
It's outrageous. It's outrageous. Just for the record, Matt, how much money did the SPLC donate to Liberty Counsel?
None, of course. Okay. But, you know, they've attacked us, and we've had to spend a lot of money in defending them, defending Liberty Counsel. So here's the other thing they did. They opened up these bogus bank accounts. So the money that they're giving to these is not coming from the, quote, SPLC. SPLC is funding these bogus accounts that they created. So they went to this bank. I went to at least two banks. But one bank, they opened up multiple accounts, and they might have the account under some innocuous name, totally unrelated. And then their employees, SPLC employees, would actually certify to the bank that they were the sole proprietor of that particular business, which was non-existent. There were no employees. It was nothing. It was just a name. So they opened up these fraudulent bank accounts. The SPLC would then funnel money into those fraudulent accounts, and then those accounts would turn around and pay these white supremacist leaders and organizers. And then when the bank got suspicious, they did some investigation about these accounts. The president of SPLC and the chairman of the board of SPLC wrote a letter to the bank acknowledging that these were SPLC accounts, and they asked for them to be immediately shut down. All of that is listed in this criminal indictment, this indictment that the Attorney General of the United States, acting Attorney General, just discussed.
Matt, this is just shocking. It is jaw-dropping to hear this, that they're supporting the organizations, that they are made them, basically lifted them up. These are the bad people. We've got to fight against these, raise money for them, and then funneling this money to them in order so that they could raise more money. The other aspect is interesting, Matt, that this investigation against SPLC actually started years ago. Some think it's just under the current Trump administration. It's just recent since this new attacking Attorney General got in there. But I understand it was former President Biden that shut down an ongoing investigation.
That's right. That's right. This had been going on for a long time, and so under the Biden administration, it got derailed. So it got picked up again to continue. And by the way, who started this investigation? It was the bank, I believe. That's how it all started, and that's how it got reported up to federal authorities. And why? Because the bank had these bogus accounts that were there. Mm-hmm. And the bogus accounts, they're representing that they have official operation, that there's the person that's actually saying, I'm a sole proprietor. This is the business that I'm operating under. And they opened up these accounts, and then they became very suspicious about these particular accounts. They're constantly getting this money in, and they're constantly paying it out. And that's when they started to do investigations on them, and that's when here's another thing, by the way. This is not even enlisted in one of the lists. So these are SPLC employees that signed their name to open up a bogus account that doesn't really represent anything other than just a fictitious name they created. So as the bank is investigating these people, the SPLC paid another staff member or another person to take the fall for one of their staff members that signed on to opening this bank. So they paid, I think, $6,000 to somebody to take the blame for this other person while they're trying to protect one of their employees that was actually opening a particular account. They paid someone to take the fall. This sounds like a criminal organization to me. This basically sounds like a criminal organization that actually is in the process of, spying on people and paying off people to take the fall for somebody who's at fault. And this, by the way, again, this is not some renegade employee. This was acknowledged by the president of SPLC and by the chairman of their board in a joint letter to the bank signed by both of them.
Wow. Matt, I understand also, one of the problems in all of this, as you were alluding to earlier, is that there are numerous organizations that actually use the SPLC as their Bible, their roadmap as to who are these extremist groups, who should people donate to, not donate to. And there have been many who have put their full faith, trust, confidence in the SPLC, who has totally been leading them astray, and many organizations have suffered as a result.
Yeah, so there's both government and there's private. And so certainly during the Obama administration and then also during the Clinton administration as well. But the Obama administration even increased it, and certainly the Biden administration increased it. So they were actually giving full access to the SPLC to the highest levels of government during those administrations. They were using the SPLC's so-called hate list. They were training law enforcement. They were training the military. They were training the FBI. They were training other levels of the CIA and others using the SPLC false information. Then in the private sector, the SPLC would go to these banks and they would lobby them and put pressure on them to defund, to debank, to close accounts, and to cause financial harm to these other nonprofit organizations. And so they created this hate list in which they have real organizations that are violent, except they don't have, for example, Antifa. They leave them off, and they said they're not going to put them on there, as violent as they are. No. They only put certain ones on there.
Yeah, like Liberty Counsel.
Yeah.
Matt Staver with us today from Liberty Counsel. Friends, we're going to be hearing from the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, in a clip that he spoke on the Senate floor pertaining to this. We're also going to be getting into this Sharia courts as well. Back in a minute on Crosstalk.
For over 200 years, the American judicial system has upheld a standard so strong that a person's very life can be ended based on this level of confidence. A verdict supported by evidence that is beyond a reasonable doubt. Did you know there is evidence demonstrated beyond a reasonable doubt that we have a creator? Most are unaware of it because it has been censored from textbooks. Now, you can have this information at your fingertips. In the beautifully illustrated hardcover book, Have You Considered? Evidence Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, Bruce Malone and Julie Von Vatz provide a series of unique devotions presenting evidence for every day of the year that points to the Creator. It's written in an easy-to-read format so that young and old can learn. Have You Considered is available for a donation of $18 or more from VCY. Call 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Matt Staver with us from Liberty Counsel. Friends, we'd encourage you to sign up for their email list, lc.org. That stands for Liberty Counsel, lc.org. Matt, you're there really fighting on behalf of the First Amendment rights, religious freedom rights of people all across this nation.
Yeah, we are. Liberty Counsel is fighting for religious freedom, the sanctity of human life, God's design for marriage and family. Our website is lc.org, and so if you have an issue personally, or you know somebody in the community, let us know, because we're here to help. All that we do, whether we're counseling you, providing a letter, giving you information, or filing a case and going all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, we do it at no cost. We're supported by individuals who donate to us, and I can guarantee you we're not going to be doing what the SPLC is doing. So we're fighting for real justice and righteousness.
Friends, again, the SPLC has been indicted with fraud, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer just outraged by the Department of Justice over these indictments. This is what he had to say from the Senate floor.
On the Southern Poverty Law Center, I just want to say a quick word about the deeply disturbing charges the Justice Department has brought against the Southern Poverty Law Center. These charges should send a chill down the spine of every American who cares about free expression and the rule of law in the Justice Department. It should send a chill down the spine of every American who cares about civil liberties and the fight against violence extremism. Let's be clear what this case is all about, is really about. It has nothing to do with alleged wire fraud or with the Southern Poverty Law Center somehow working in coordination with the KKK. That's ridiculous on its face. It doesn't pass the laugh test. It's about Donald Trump turning the Department of Justice into the Department of Vengeance, his own attack dog. He's done it time and time and time again, and when you think it can't get worse, it does. To attack the Southern Poverty Law Center of collaboration and accuse it of collaboration with their known enemy, the KKK. Weaponizing the DOJ to indict civil rights groups is not law and order. It's a message. If you defend voting rights, if you fight white supremacy, you're next. Donald Trump will use the federal government to go after any group that dares to speak out against them. This is amazing. In 1983, the Ku Klux Klan tried to burn down the Southern Poverty Law Center for daring to expose its hatred. More than 4 decades later, the Trump administration is trying to do the same thing in the courtroom. It's an absolute disgrace. How far this administration goes down.
Senator Chuck Schumer, Matt, your response to this, I mean, he said this should send chills down our spine. The Trump administration, as its Department of Justice, has turned him into the Department of Vengeance. And how dare they, when especially the KKK tried to, burn down SPLC?
Well, I certainly agree with Chuck Schumer that it does send chills down your spine, but for a totally different reason. He even acknowledges this is absurd. This is an absurd situation. Yeah, it is absurd, Chuck Schumer. It is absurd that they're actually funding the groups that they say that they're opposing. That is absurd. It's hard to believe, but you know what? They didn't make this up. The Trump administration didn't make this up. The banks didn't make this up. The Trump administration, the DOJ, did not write the letter from the president and the chairman that they created these fictitious false accounts. They didn't actually pay off someone to take the fall for someone for opening up one of these accounts. They're not the ones who actually paid the leaders of the KKK. They're not the ones who helped organize the Charlottesville riots that resulted in death and actually created funding and provided funding to transport people there. That's what the SPLC did. Read the indictment, Chuck Schumer. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is absurd what the SPLC did, but unfortunately and sadly, and what does send chills up your body is that's exactly what happened. And he just simply doesn't want to believe reality. He's living in a fairy tale world. Read the indictment. I bet he hasn't read it. Read the indictment. Read what the bank was doing, why it was concerned about these fraudulent accounts. That's how it came to the attention of the federal authorities. Yeah, it is absurd. It does send chills up your spine, but it's because no one in their right mind would think of doing this other than criminal organizations. And this sounds like a criminal enterprise. It's certainly a fraudulent enterprise that we knew that beyond this. I mean, nobody would anticipate they did something this crazy and despicable. But we knew from past events, why do they have all these hundreds of millions of dollars in offshore accounts? Why does a nonprofit need to hide their money in secret offshore accounts? That doesn't sound right. Why, in fact, are their employees complaining all over in droves about their leadership, about their racism? They're supposed to be anti-racist, and yet look at the employees that have said, this is one of the most racist organizations that they've ever worked for. Mm. This is from their own employees. So this is a corrupt organization that causes harm, and, when you have no moral compass, this is the kind of nonsense, the criminal type of operation that they're engaged in.
Where does this go now? What happens next?
Well, where this goes now is this is a civil forfeiture federal indictment. So the question is, will there be criminal action that comes out of this afterward? So if it's just simply a civil forfeiture, the SPLC has hundreds of millions of dollars, about $1 billion organization. They can pay it and not even blink. So they need to have a greater penalty than just paying $3 million. This is wire fraud. This is also donor fraud. So they need to actually, I think somebody needs to be in prison over this.
This story has really not been front and center on legacy media, has it?
No, because they don't want to put this front and center, because this is their favorite, entity that promotes all this hatred, violence against conservative, religious freedom, pro-family organizations. And so when it comes out, they're not going to report it. But in organizations and media like you, this is where it's coming out. Mm-hmm. And, you're not going to be able to ignore this. This is real, and it is a very sad situation. It should really impact their donor base, because a lot of people gave to them that are supporting SPLC.
It had to send
following
shivers.
The Charlottesville situation.
Yeah,
and then they helped organize Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm. It actually had to send shivers down the spines of their donors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the donors ought to demand refunds, because the last place that these donors want their money to go is to the KKK, the Aryan Nation, the National Alliance, or some of these other violent white supremacy groups that the SPLC was funding.
Yeah. Friends, Matt has written on this at Liberty Counsel, lc.org. You'll find news releases there. Sign up to receive their alerts that go out at lc.org. Wow, looking at the clock, Matt, there's another issue that really demands more time than what we have today, but Islamic law, known as Sharia, has really been creeping into our legal system across the country.
Yeah, it has. And amazingly, there's even some courts that have relied upon Sharia law in domestic disputes. In fact, even though the one judge in a particular case in New Jersey got overturned, the judge basically deferred to Islamic Sharia law that the wife is just property of the husband, and the husband can do as he will with his wife in terms of abuse and other kinds of sexual assault. It's outrageous, and so there is pending legislation right now in Congress that would ban Sharia from being used in the court system. We've actually written on that, and we are supporting a particular bill that is involved in stopping this, and we have it on our website, lcaction.org. That's lcaction.org. That's our sister ministry, Liberty Counsel Action.
lcaction.org. And friends, for your reference, the pieces of legislation are entitled Preserving a Sharia-Free America Act. And it's been making its way. There are Sharia councils that are in operation right now as we speak, different parts of the country, and this would put a stop to that. H.R. 5722, H.R. 5722, and S3009. These are in the U.S. Congress. The House bill, again, H.R. 5722, and in the Senate, it's S3009, Preserving a Sharia-Free America Act. And, Matt, I think about this year of, 250 years as a nation, and the Declaration of Independence. Sharia is very much an affront to our that declaration. It's an affront to our U.S. Constitution as well.
Yeah, it's totally incompatible with U.S. law. And, we see some of these happening in Europe, and Europe should have taken a strong stand a long time ago. But certain places in France and England, Great Britain, for example, they are being overrun by these kinds of communities that have basically no-go zones for law enforcement, and the Sharia courts as well. And there are certain Sharia courts that are popping up in Western civilization type countries. There's actually Sharia courts that are popping up in the United States. Now, they're not officially recognized by the government per se, but they're actually happening. And then there are some cases that we've cited in some of our emails and communications where courts have actually deferred to that. There's a case going on and there's a voter referendum that came out, citizen vote against this, the Epic City in Texas, where they were creating this entire city, and it was only going to be for Muslims. No one else was allowed to come to that city. Well, that is being attacked right now with the Attorney General, and then there's also a citizen vote against it. But these are things happening. It's not just, in parts of Michigan or parts of Minnesota, but they're happening across the country.
And friends, you can go to congress.gov and put in the bill numbers. You can call them up, look at them, H.R. 5722, S3009, and you can reach out to your members of Congress, 202-224-3121. Friends, our number to Crosstalk today, 800-733-9829. Talked about the two Supreme Court decisions that came out today. We've talked about the matter of the Southern Poverty Law Center, the indictments against them. We're talking about also the Sharia-Free America Act and what's happening right now with the Sharia creeping into our legal system. And our number, 800-733-9829. Matt, we're just a minute and a half before the break, but you just had a victory in regard to some demand letters that you sent to the U.S. Navy's Warfare Center in Rhode Island. What was that about?
Yeah, we've had several victories here with regards to the Navy Center Command and also the military. And in fact, I can't go into much detail, but we'll be having some meetings in Washington, D.C. This week, in fact, with high-level individuals to address the LGBTQ agenda within the military and the anti-religious, anti-particular Christian issues, and then also the things with respect to the forced vaccination. We represent individuals in the LGBT that are being targeted because of their pro-family, God-created male and female belief with this LGBTQ agenda, some that are just simply expressing their Christian views that are being targeted for their Christian faith. And then we also have others that want to be opted out of the flu vaccine. And one of them who actually had an injury already from the first flu vaccine now wants to be opted out. and is facing opposition. The good news, however, is we've had a lot of success up in Connecticut and here also at the highest levels from Pete Hegseth, who repealed that mandate and said, no, we're not going to force it anymore. So a lot of activities happening within the various branches of the military on all those areas.
Friends, a quick break. Come back here to your phone calls. Our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Get on board. Your questions or brief comments. Matt Staver with us today from Liberty Counsel. LC.org is our website. We'll be right back.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. We need to get back to the Bible, particularly when it comes to the issue of evangelism and what it means to preach the gospel. Sadly, many people are being told today, well, you don't know if the person you're talking to is even ready to hear the gospel yet. How do you know they have been regenerated? They have to be regenerated before they can be saved. They have to be born again before they can be born again. You never see that taught in the Bible. Over and over the passages. Believe on the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. It's over and over. Charles Spurgeon addressed this in 1863. Quote, if I am to preach faith in Christ to a man who is regenerated, then the man being regenerated is saved already. And it is unnecessary and ridiculous thing for me to preach Christ to him and bid him to believe in order to be saved when he is saved already being regenerate. End quote. Folks, don't be hindered. Preach the gospel. I'm Brennan House.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. So many issues unfolding here today. A couple of decisions from the U.S. Supreme Court today that were just released. Spent a lot of time dealing with the Southern Poverty Law Center issue and the indictments brought against them. Amazing information, just not hitting the mainstream media right now. Also talking about what's going on with the Sharia Free America Act and certainly those who are trying to introduce Islamic law into our system of justice here in the States. Our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Let's begin with Jim calling in from Wisconsin. Hi, Jim, you're on the air. Hello, Jim. Jim, one more time. Go ahead, Jim.
Yes, Matt, do you consider yourself a constitutional lawyer?
Of course.
Okay. So my question is, don't you agree that Sharia is the enemy of our Constitution?
Yes.
Okay. So when these people these Muslims that are running for office and they take an oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, aren't they violating that very oath?
Well, I think on certain ones, definitely. I mean, you see what they do, and they say after they've taken this oath, and you know that they can't be serious about taking the oath when they criticize our own Constitution and our government and elevate their, Sharia type of Islamic practices above our Constitution. There's actually some efforts in Congress to actually address this very issue that I think all of us are concerned about.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim.
So,
yeah.
Yes. When they violate that oath of office, isn't there a clause in there that says that if you violate that oath, that you should be removed from office? Are you aware of that?
Well, certainly I think the first enforcer of that is the body in which they're actually taking that oath of office in the state and or federal government. So I think there ought to be some enforcement action against them because it's pretty clear that they really don't believe in the oath of office.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And certainly there's that level of impeachment, and there's also the voters that are told them, we the people. Thank you, Jim. Nancy is next. Hi, Nancy, you're on the air.
Hi. Wouldn't Sharia be like putting in a second law? I mean, we have a Constitution, and that's the only law we're supposed to use, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's why it's totally incompatible. At the end of the day, it cannot coexist. At the end of the day, you can't really use Sharia when you have a Constitution. But what we see happening is this creeping Sharia. And so what happens is some of the communities basically agree to be bound by this Sharia, and then eventually you get these Muslim-dominated communities, like up in, for example, Michigan, and this is what's happened around the world, and this also is happening, say, in places like Texas, where you wouldn't even think about it, and then they start to grow and grow and grow. That's why this federal legislation is to stop it before it gets out of control, because once it gets out of control, there's a tipping point.
Yep.
And that's what we've seen happen in various parts of Europe.
Thank you, Nancy. We've got David in Santa Fe, New Mexico. David, you're on the air.
Yeah, how you doing? Thank you. It's about Sharia. Yeah. The crazy thing is why don't we take our Constitution and go to other countries and enforce, see if we can enforce our law over there. I mean, it's just insane that people are even entertaining that thought over here in this country to allow Sharia to be in this country. It's just ridiculous, really. Come on, people, wake up.
Yeah, agree. Totally agree.
Thank you, David, for your call here as well. And Matt, when we think about that, I mean, Sharia is very much a system of they're here to, they're a legal system in itself, and it seeks to...
Yeah, it is. They have a whole legal system. Women have no rights. They're treated as property. So you can take, a little girl as young as 10 and marry that girl to a 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old, 70-year-old, whatever it is, and basically they become sex slaves. You have women that have no property rights, so they can be physically abused, sexually abused. They can be raped over and over again with no recourse. They're treated as property. They're not considered a human being in that respect. And that's part of it. And there's all other kinds of things as well. There's also Sharia banking laws and monetary systems. So it is a very comprehensive system.
Yeah, and friends, those who are regular listeners to the Crosstalk, we've spoken with people like Usama Daktak and Shahram Hadian, former Muslim, and who have warned and have gone into great detail regarding Sharia, but it is not compatible with our Constitution. And yet, at the same time, Matt, we have those that are trying to, purport this to be introduced using our Constitution as a means to enter into our system.
Yeah, exactly. And again, we've actually had cases that we've cited in some of our communications at Liberty Counsel Action of courts actually deferring to Sharia laws, bizarre as it sounds. Those kinds of judges that ought to be impeached because they're also obligated to follow and apply the Constitution of the United States, not some foreign Sharia.
Friends, again, it's H.R. 5722 and also S3009 is called Preserving a Sharia-Free America Act. We're going to squeeze one last call in, and this is Joan calling in today. Hi, Joan, you're on the air.
Hi there. 20-some years ago, I was very much the activist, and I went to my congressman because I had Frank Gaffney's book on the Sharia threat, and I went to a Republican meeting in Waupaca County. The Waupaca was also the city, and I asked if I could please speak for just 3 minutes to share about Sharia. And the fellow who was in charge of the meeting and said, no, we don't have any time. So what I did is I went all around in the group of the people who had come, and I had little pieces of paper with Frank Gaffney's situation and the Sharia threat, and I explained to them that already, now this is 20 years ago, already 50 court cases had been adjudicated using Sharia. So then I went to another meeting where my congressman was, and I brought it up to him, and he laughed at me. He said, we have a Constitution, which is a supreme law of the land.
Yeah. Tell you what, I wish we had more time, Joan. We're down to 10 seconds. Thank you for sharing that. Matt, the final comment from you on our topics today.
Well, we've covered a lot here, and so I think the main thing is continue to press forward, make sure you get in contact with good information, and then don't be afraid to articulate our Judeo-Christian values. They will always prevail because truth prevails. We're living at an incredible time in American and world history. God's called us for this time, in this time in history. And, all you have to do is say yes to the Lord, and He can do an incredible work in you.
Joan has done just that in speaking up at these meetings. Matt, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And friends, thanks for joining us on Crosstalk. Check out the website, lc.org. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.